So the subject for tonight is Fastify, which is it's one of the many node-based web application frameworks. And I've been reading a lot about it online, and I was just kind of curious to see, it's like, well, what are the reasons to use this over, Express or Happy or one of the others? So I started doing a little bit of research, and I figured it'd make a good subject for a presentation. And, end of last year, Node released Node 14, and they started doing, which is now the LTS version, long-term support version. And they also have a Node 15 that they're also doing at the same time, which is like the latest stuff that's in that release. And one of the things that's interesting is reading up on it is that, if you take a look at Express, it's really still built for the original version of Node. In other words, it still uses callbacks the same way, the whole 9 yards. And so I figured it'd be interesting to see, if there's a more modern take on that. So with that being said, first slide is recruiting. I'm trying to get people that might be interested in doing a presentation for Node.js or for JaxNode. It doesn't have to be Node specific, but it certainly helps if it covers stuff that's in the server development, web application development, that sort of thing. But obviously last year was kind of a rough year for the group, like for everybody else, just because we haven't been able to meet in person, which sucks. I'm hoping that they'll be able to get vaccines out to everybody, and everybody we can get over the pandemic and start meeting in person again. But in the meantime, I'm looking for people that can present in the next couple of months. It would be kind of like we're doing tonight, just another Zoom type of meeting. So if anybody's interested or has something they'd like to cover or saw something new that they'd like to talk about, please feel free to come in and do that. So we've got some more people joining. That's good. So does anybody recognize where this is from? Everybody see the ludicrous speed?
Yeah, that has to be from a Tesla.
Actually, Tesla, I believe they do have, they have the different modes and stuff like that, and one is ludicrous speed. And that's actually taken from the movie Spaceballs, which was Mel Brooks' take on his spoofing of science fiction. But that's where that comes from. But that's kind of be the theme for tonight is ludicrous speed, and how can we get ludicrous speed? So Fastify, this is an alternative REST framework for Node.js. It was created to kind of overcome some of the shortcomings found in Express and some of the other frameworks. It's extremely fast. It's also extremely extendable. They also have some other nice features, like they have schema validation. So they're actually using JSON schema for defining what your models and stuff look like. And then they also have a pretty nice logging feature that's built into it as well. And they also claim to be completely TypeScript ready. But it seems to me, any application that you can run JavaScript is technically TypeScript ready, because you can always transpile your TypeScript into the JavaScript. But they claim to have very good support for that as well. So speaking of support, this was actually created by Matteo Collina and Tomas Vidova. And those two gentlemen are, I know that for a fact Matteo is a Node.js core contributor. He works a lot on, I believe, the V8 integration with Node.js. And those two gentlemen are both Italians, and I think that's also kind of a nice theme for tonight, because if you're familiar with Italian sports cars, Ferraris and Lamborghinis and stuff like that, You know, they also like speed. And so I think that's fits in with the theme for tonight's presentation. So I believe Matteo works for Nearform, but this project is actually sponsored by Nearform, OpenJS, and Microsoft. And there's actually been up to 19 different contributors, maintainers for their project. So it's not this is just one person's little kind of like hobby or something like that. It's got active support. And this is what some of the code actually kind of looks like. So if we take a look at this example right here, we can see that that when we go to require the Fastify module, that they actually use curring here to instantiate that to actually get the active Fastify object. And then here they're just assigning a route. And let's see here. And then they're also taking advantage of async and await as well in here. So that's one of the things they're trying to do, is they're trying to make sure that they are using some of the newer features and stuff that are available in Node.js. But that's kind of your basic simple hello world application. And this is what the validation schema looks like. So you can see right here that they've taken, you know, on the request, they've taken the query string and they have a model they've defined for that. So if you were to try to submit something that's outside of this model, it would most likely throw an error. And then they've also did the same thing for the response. So they have a response here. And I think one of the key things here that's nice about this, if you're using something like, I'm trying to remember, Swagger as an example, there's actually a plugin for using Swagger with this as well. This will help you, you know, auto-generate a lot of the stuff that you need in order for doing your Swagger. And they also have a pretty vast plugin ecosystem as well. So they have, you know, you can imagine any database system, like whether it's PostgreSQL, SQL, or MongoDB, Redis, you know, all the OAuth. I just mentioned Swagger before. They've got plugins that are part of the core that you can use for your applications. And they also have 124 community plugins as well. So they have the core, and then they have community, and then they actually make it very easy to write your own. And so that's actually something I kind of like about this project, is that they do have a pretty extensible framework. And this is this is from their website. This is a grid kind of, or table showing like what features they have between Hoppy and Express and Fastify. And you know, one of the things you can see here is that Hoppy actually supports almost all the same features that that Fastify has, with one exception being middleware. And if you look here on the Express side, Express really doesn't have plugins, doesn't have built-in validation, doesn't have hooks, doesn't have decorators. You can add like logging, and you can use async and await in Express, but it's not one of the built-in features of Express. But Fastify supports all this thing. But here's the key difference here is performance. So one of the reasons why Fastify is a lot faster is that they're not using, I believe it's on the Node side, it's the Connect API. So they built their whole framework outside of having to use Connect. So it's a lot lighter weight and a lot faster. So you can see here, they claim up to twice as fast as Express. So that's a pretty significant claim.
So hold on, Mister. Go back to that previous slide.
Sure.
I was reading that bottom row as size of the download, but no, I get it, per second. Okay, so that's 36,000 requests per second.
They claim they can have twice as many requests per second on the same processor. So okay. I haven't done any performance testing, but one of the things, I think this is one of the things that's kind of crucial with this, is the guys that are building, maintaining this are also working on a lot of the diagnostic stuff that's used for Node.js. So like you can go online and take a look at some presentations and stuff they've done where they use these heat graphs to kind of show like how many cycles and stuff, CPU cycles are being used per request, and it's broken down by each module and stuff like that. It's pretty sophisticated stuff for being able to go through and debug and take a look and see like what are the bottlenecks and stuff that you're seeing. One of the tools I think is called Ox, and they use that to kind of show like this is the same request happening on Fastify, this is the same request happening in Express, and showing the difference. So
okay, cool.
Yeah. So plugins. To use a plugin, all you have to do is import it in, register it using the register function, and you can see that plugins, they just need to have the following signature. You need to pass it the Fastify object itself, pass in an options object to pass in all the different things you want to use in there, and then there's also you can pass in a done method for once it's the execution's completed. And in Fastify, plugins are definitely preferred over middleware. And I'll get into that a little bit later. So here's an example of a route, and but the route is being brought in as a plugin. So if you look right here, you can see they're doing the Fastify register and then just doing require on the route. And that's it. Now, anytime you get a request that matches this route, it's automatically handled by the application. Another feature they have, which is kind of nice, is decorators. And I've done this with middleware in Express, but they have a built-in feature now. So if you need to assign a function or an object or just a variable that make it accessible throughout your application, all you have to do is create this decorate request. And so you can see here in this example right here, this is probably not the best example because you're actually creating a user. But in this case, what they're doing here is they're saying we're going to decorate this user to Fastify, and then in the pre-handler, they're assigning this user, and then on the request, they can just grab that user. It's automatically, it's like been made globally now inside the framework, and I think that's really handy if you need to be able to inject functionality in at certain places and stuff. I think that's pretty handy. Another way of thinking about this is just think of it as an easy way of doing monkey patching.
I don't know what monkey patching is, but you're about to tell me.
Okay, well, so one of the features that's kind of unique about JavaScript compared to some other programming languages, this is actually one of the things that some people don't like about JavaScript, is that I can create an object, right? And now I have that object, I'm using that object, but I want to just add a method to that object, or I want to add a property to it after I've already created it. Now there's a feature you can use called freeze, object.freeze, where you can basically, it works kind of like the final or.
Yeah, seal an object.
Yeah, exactly, sealed, like if you're sealing it like in C#. But that's actually, it's a practice. That's one of the things that I remember early on, like trying to find bugs in JavaScript. One of the issues I was running across like 10 years ago was people would monkey patch in their own behavior, their override existing behavior. And it's like, where the heck is that happening? But this is actually I think a pretty slick way of being able to do it. So I like this approach because it's a little bit hairier to try to do this with Express. Routing. So they support all the standard verbs that you expect to see with HTTP. And then you just use Fastify.route just like you would in an Express if you wanted to create a route. And it says right here, well, actually, normally you just use the verb in express, but here they're using the route method. And they also support express style shorthand version as well. So let's take a look at some examples here. So we talked a little bit before about the schema here, but this is kind of like the, would be the traditional, I guess, the verbose way of defining a route in Fastify. So you can see here that we specified, our HTTP verb, which this is going to be a get method. We have the actual URL route in there, and then we have the schema in here, which responds. It's looking for a name and excitement, one being a type string, one being type integer, and then they have the response with the 200 status, what that looks like, and then here there's doing a reply.send on that for the handler.
So is that their own schema? It doesn't look like it's regular. It's not JSON schema. This is more like, I'm familiar with RAML, right? Which is the mule mechanism of describing an API, but this must be their own thing.
So let's take a look here at the documentation.
Is there a schema? Because in both schema examples that you gave, we haven't seen a like a post schema or request inbound schema. We've seen the query string schema and the response schema, but not yet the, if we were expecting a JSON object in the on a post or something.
Yeah. So I'm just taking a look at this real quick.
That looks fluent. So that looks like it's a fluent.
This is a little bit different. Yeah.
And there's some required, that's interesting, required fields, shared address schema. I mean, the schemas have, I mean, there's a lot of power there, hopefully, relative to validation, because you definitely want to make sure that an inbound JSON object, turns out, folks, that, JavaScript object, you can send in a function as the value to a property, and then when that property gets called, the function is run. So you can actually send bad JSON to an API, and if they're not careful, if they don't validate it, they'll actually start calling functionality that you posted to them.
Yeah.
And so it can be bad news. It's like an XML bomb message, which is a message that you can send to a SOAP endpoint, and have it recursively use all memory, and it's a denial of service. But that's why I'm intrigued by the schema validation, especially if the inbound, if we say, hey, this needs to be a string and not a function, then hopefully it rejects the inbound message. You know what I mean?
Well, one of the things they claim is that this actually helps them be faster. So if you use a schema or whatever, there's less checking that has to be done. But you can see here that this is actually a lot more verbose than what I did in my, or what I've been showing in my presentation, because they actually have references and things like that in here. So my recommendation, if you want to find out more about this, is to go through the docs. But yeah, I find this pretty interesting, because one of the things they also talked about in the research that I was looking at was with the parsing, just as an example. Like, one of the things they recommend doing is actually using this fast JSON stringify rather than the built-in JavaScript stringify, because they claim that this is actually much faster than the stringify that comes with inside of V8. So it's some pretty interesting stuff on what they're doing to optimize things. So here's a long form of a route. You can see where they've defined the options. And then here, we just have a response. And you can see here, they're just using actually, this is actually the short form here. Not right sure why we're long form, but this is a short form version of this here with the route. And this is what the route formatting looks like. So for instance, like if we're doing, we wanted to pass in a user ID parameter, this works just like it does in Express, where you delimit it with a colon in front of the parameter name. You can also pass in wildcard references as well. And you can also use regular expressions as well. So if you're, in this example here, it's like they're looking for a file they would download, and as long as the file matches this regular expression, then that's what they'll wind up delivering. They also have prefixes. I thought this was actually kind of nice. So when you're going and you're finding all your routes, you don't have to worry about putting the prefix in the route name. You can just define your routes as you normally would. And then in this case, what they're doing here is they have a prefix called V1. So all the routes here would be the version 1 of the service. And then, so you could have your routes just start off with, let's say, /user or something like that. And then it would go, you'd actually be able to use the route with V1 at the beginning and / whatever your route is. So here's an example of how you could do this in code, where they're requiring these like plugins, and then they're assigned the prefix here under the options. And then both of these, if you look at this right here, we have 2 different handlers that they're set up in here for these plugins. But what it's doing here is when you go to call this, you're going to call this with a V1 /user or V2 /user. They also have templating. So if you're looking to do something outside of just REST-based services, they have a view method that you can use. That gets you just bring this stuff in as a plugin, and then they have support for Marco, Pug, EGS, Handlebars, Twig, Liquid, and a couple more. And so basically, what you do is you just add an engine parameter when you're registering the plugin to get this stuff to work. And it looks kind of like this. So if we're using EGS as an example, what you do is you bring in the point of view. It's actually called a point of view plugin. And then you'd also have to import in EGS if you're using EGS as your view engine here. But you can see here they're defining the root for where this would exist. So all this stuff would exist inside of a view folder. And then you can specify a layout and then a view extension as well. So they'll let you just basically just define this stuff, and then it'll just be used inside of your views. They also have hooks, which is kind of handy as well. I think one of the reasons they did this is for debugging purposes, but this is also very useful for testing. And the hooks are basically grouped into 2 different areas. They have hooks that are specific to the request, and they also have application hooks as well. And so if you look at this, these are some of the different hooks. So you can see here that we've got on request, pre-parsing, pre-validation, a pre-handler, pre-serialization, and then on error, on send, on response, on timeout, on ready, on close, on route, and on register. So those are, that's most of the hook types that are in the framework. So if you need to do some type of cross-cutting and stuff like that, they'll come in pretty handy. And this is basically how you define a hook. So here you're saying on pre-parsing, I want to pass in this method, and then you just execute whatever's in that method and return the payload. So that's what hooks look like. Middleware. So I thought this is pretty interesting. So when they originally developed the framework, they didn't have Express compatibility. This is actually kind of a cool feature, the fact that they can actually support Express middleware. So they have their own middleware that you can also use as well. They have something called MIDI, or MIDDIE, that has better performance than the Express middleware. But the thing that's cool about this is there's existing middleware that you can't live without that's part of Express they support that. So for instance, like if you're using Passport for your authentication, you can just bring that in and use that as middleware inside of Fastify. So that's kind of a cool feature. But obviously, what they're trying to do is they're trying to make sure that you're using the more modern, faster stuff. So it's like if this is like I can't live without this stuff, I'm not going to go back and rewrite it so that it runs with Fastify. I just need to be able to use it. You can still use it using Fastify, which I think is kind of cool. And this is an example of some of the different type of Express middleware that people are using. They have one it looks pretty interesting called Helmet, which allows you to send or create HTTP headers for security. But you can see here that they have they're bringing in this Fastify Express, and then what they're doing is they're just importing all these different Express middlewares into Fastify. So you can take advantage of all that stuff. And this is what MIDI looks like. Instead of the Fastify Express, you bring in MIDI, and then you can bring in like their version of CORS. This is the thing else I thought was interesting. So one of the things I think that kind of fits in with this topic of speed and performance and stuff like that. I don't know how many people here are using AWS or Azure or
Azure functions.
Yeah. So they have support for AWS Lambda, Netlify Lambda, and Versal. Versal is another. They changed names. I forget what they used to be called, but they're one of these kind of really easy. You can spin up a web server from the command line on their service, just like that. And it's a pretty neat, it's from the same guy that developed, what was it?
Heroku or Firebase?
No. There's, they're their own service, but they're set up so that if you want to host like an Express, or I think they do other languages as well. But you can also host Docker containers and stuff like that. And you basically just go to the command line and you have like a Versal command that you type in, and boom, it just spins it up on their platform. So it's very easy to get started and stuff like that. But the thing is, all of these services, right? How does like Amazon and Microsoft charge for these services? Well, they charge for the amount of space that you're taking up. They charge for the amount of bandwidth you're using. They're charging for the CPU cycles. So it actually behooves the developer. It's like, this is one of the things I remember talking to people a couple of years ago. It's like, well, RAM is cheap. There's all this commodity server hardware. So it's like, we really don't have to write our code to be that efficient. And I think the exact opposite is true. I think that nowadays, especially with a lot of these cloud-based providers and stuff like that, it actually behooves you to write your code to be as efficient, memory efficient, CPU efficient as possible. And so frankly, a lot of people, like the way that they're developing a lot of their services and stuff like that, it's like, Node's not even fast enough for them. So they might be using something like Rust or Java or C++, or, God forbid, Golang for developing like microservices. And it turns out that these Lambda features are actually, essentially are just microservices and stuff like that. And so, you get a certain amount for free right off the bat. Like if you're using AWS Lambda, I forget like how many, I think it's like 100,000 or 200,000 requests. The first 200,000 requests are free or something like that. But it's like once you get past that in a month, it's like they start charging for it. So you want to write your code so it's as efficient as possible. So they do have all this serverless support. And so if you're using something like AWS Lambda, I don't think they have built-in support yet for Azure Functions, but I imagine that's probably something that they would probably wind up supporting pretty soon if they're not doing it already. So that was interesting.
Hmm.
So let me give a quick demo here. So I just have a little bit of code that I wrote for this. So this is kind of like the hello world that we were looking at before. Let me blow that up so everybody can see that a little bit better. And I'm just going to come over here and I'm going to, I'm going to start a server up. So I'm going to say node index.js. And you can see that we've got logging and stuff is turned on here. And I'm just going to come over here and I'm going to do this here first. I'm going to say curl localhost 3000. Boom. So there we get our hello world. Pretty simple, nothing spectacular here. All right. And this is one where I'm actually using a schema sample. So we saw this, this is similar to what we had before, but here I have a name. And then what I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be outputting the name here once it's passed in. And I'm using the schema here. It's looking for a parameter called name. So we come over here and I'm going to do node. All right. So let's come over here to the browser and I'm just going to do this. Localhost 3000, and I'm going to say, what was that parameter again?
Name.
Name, okay. We'll say name is going to be equal to JaxNode. And there, we can see output JaxNode. And then if I want to, I come over here and I can change that. I can say Brady. Now we got Brady. So nothing under the sleeve, just a good old-fashioned node.
I want to see 37,000 of those things in 1 second, if you can, please.
I don't have that tooling set up on here. So essentially, this is actually my work laptop, and so I'm pretty careful about what I put on here and run on here. But they do have a lot. I mean, like I said before, the gentlemen behind this project are also behind a lot of the debug tooling that's available for Node. And so, I mean, the Fastify actually came as an afterthought. They were working on all this other tooling, and they're trying to show off, you know, like how you could use this tooling and stuff like that to get better performance and stuff out of your software. And that's basically they wrote a lot of the tooling first before they ever did anything with actually writing Fastify. But Fastify's been out for a couple of years now. So any questions related to this?
No, it just, now the questions are, you know, since it's been out a few years, it's amazing that this is the first I heard of it. Or maybe not, that's not amazing. But question is, who's using it in production? You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
What kind of iterations are, what's their long-term support? What version is out now? What, you know, Node has a pretty good support.
3.0 is the current version. It's probably a little bit higher than 3.0 now, but you can see here that some of the people that use it are Microsoft. I'm not familiar with, I know I'm familiar with Nearform, but I'm not familiar with a lot of these others like Mr. Porter or Quero or Keeply or Saturn. But I'm assuming it's whoever's hospital run has got to have something that's fairly reliable. And then ASM, I'm not familiar with that one. So the one I have, the two I have heard of here are Microsoft and Airform. I think I've heard of Compressor before. Yeah.
I'm always looking, David, for what, where's the content management system? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where's the ultimate kind of web serving thing that's built on top of this platform? So where the derivative works, I guess, built on top of this framework, and that seems like an invasive thing. Of course, CMSs nowadays are old hat, but they're all being replaced by static generators, etc. You know what I mean? Is there a static generator that's generating Fastify content? You know what I mean? That kind of thing.
I think this is meant more to be like if you need to actually have like a back end that let's say your CMS would use to get data from, as an example. So like, for instance, I've been using, I played a little bit around with a framework called Next.js. In fact, the Versal, the cloud provider I was just talking about, the same people behind Versal are also behind Next.js, which essentially it's a React server. So if you're familiar with the React framework, it's a way that you can actually write stuff that will render on the server, but can also render stuff. You can do stuff on the client side like you expect to do with React. But once you have something like, for instance, like, a lot of people are building applications like using Angular or React or one of the other, client side, frameworks. And then they're writing, either a REST-based, backend. They might be using .NET or Java or something like that for their REST API. Or they may be using something like GraphQL and just basically plugging in all of their REST APIs through a single, GraphQL server. I mean, those are the things that are kind of the trends right now. I've been using Netlify, which is a hosting provider, along with a framework called Gatsby for most of my static site hosting. So for instance, like I'll use Gatsby, which essentially it's very similar to Next.js in the sense that you can use it to build a static, website. And then if I need to call services to the back end, one of the things you can do with this framework is that you can use, like I'm hosting on Netlify, you can actually use Netlify Lambda, basically their version of serverless, to essentially host functions and stuff like that. I'm primarily use Heroku for my backend hosting, just because it's simple, easy, and cheap. And I'm also a Salesforce stockholder. So I've been trying
what do you have to do for cross-site scripting? I guess that's part of the tooling, right? Is to set up the cross-site script record.
So they have middleware for that. There's cores, and then there's also some other, there's some specific stuff for the cross-site scripting. There's some middleware and stuff that you can add in that will help you with that. So those are the, essentially in this case, they actually have plugins in Fastify for doing that. In fact, let's take a look at that real quick.
Yeah, I mean, you brush by it in your presentation. It sounded like Fastify has the ability to serve web pages. You know what I mean, with Pug support, etc.
Oh yeah, they definitely support that. But I mean, I think the reason why people are going to be using Fastify is that they want to host REST-based services really quickly. And one of the things like I was talking about before was that they host middleware that's Express middleware. So if you want to be able to reuse your existing Express middleware, you can. But the idea here is that they're trying to get you off of Express. So if there's any way that you can use something that's in their ecosystem instead of using the stuff that's in the Express ecosystem, you get a performance benefit from doing that. At least that's what they claim. So like I said, I haven't done my own performance testing to verify any of this stuff, but I have been seeing a lot of people talking about it. And the guys that are, I should say the guys and gals that are behind this framework and stuff like that. They're, also some of the same people that are on their core contributors to Node.js. They work on the V8 engine. So they know about, performance and trying to get every last ounce of performance you can out of Node. So, yeah, this is definitely one I've just kind of scratched the surface of taking a look at this. Right now, I'm not hosting a lot of stuff with Express. I haven't been doing a lot of Node.js development. Ironically enough, I've been doing a lot of native mobile development. So I've been doing, like, lately, the stuff I've been working on, I've been doing a lot of Kotlin, and
that's
that's
pretty
on my.
scary relative to the JetBrains.
Well, it's from the people at JetBrains. So.
Well, yeah, David. So JetBrains was implicated in the recent, I say recent, last month, right? The December solar winds.
Oh no!
Yeah.
So I think I do remember seeing something about JetBrains.
Now the JetBrains CEO says there's no evidence that there's been a blah 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 blah, but it was their Team City build server capabilities that SolarWinds, it's a supply chain hack. So they hacked the build servers, and injected source code or injected code of malware before signing, and then the vendor. So whatever. JetBrains got pulled in. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but JetBrains is a Ukrainian company with offices in Russia.
Yeah.
And so whatever, we're on security watch for anything JetBrains in the bank. You're using Kotlin, and I'm going like, oh, I love Kotlin, but son of a bitch, JetBrains. You know what I mean?
Well, at the end of the day, what they're doing is they're taking, their source code and they're compiling it down so that it runs in the JVM.
Right.
So, so just as an example, on the Android side of stuff, the stuff that we do at my company for Android, it's like Android Studio is based off of the JetBrains, IDE. It's actually JetBrains. So, every last bit of code that we write and stuff for Android's all done on JetBrains, whether it's Java or Kotlin. But yeah, it's like, essentially, there was a article I saw today, as a matter of fact, where they were talking to some people at Microsoft about a term that I've started seeing like BlackBerry use, which is called zero trust.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And the idea behind zero trust, what that actually means is that don't assume that, any piece of software that you've purchased or any piece of hardware that you've purchased that's in your infrastructure, that it's secure. Just automatically assume, unless you've personally verified it for yourself, that is not secure. You got to treat everything like it's not secure, and then just start locking down from there. And so I think that's the best attitude to have when it comes to security, because that SolarWinds thing, it's like, that's I believe an Austin, Texas-based company and stuff like that. And we were at least up until whenever that was discovered. I don't know if it was last month or it was last month, right? The SolarWinds thing.
Well, it was. It first came out when the security company, the consulting company, FireEye.
Yeah.
They said they were hacked, and then when they dug in, they said, "Oh, it was SolarWinds," which was, I guess, a firewall type of vendor, a security vendor, and then SolarWinds did some investigation, and they've been hacked since May of 2020, when their build servers were. Anyways, you're right, zero trust, but as developers, just look at our supply chain. We use NPM daily, we use NuGet, we use Maven, PyPy. What's the Perl one? You know what I mean? Just all of our component galleries that we're integrating in, and our build servers are fetching stuff, even GitHub directly. And there is now this big question of, I know that NPM, what was it, last year and the year before, there's been published hacks about cyber currency wallet hacks, you know what I mean, found in NPM, really popular libraries. And we don't look at that. I know I'm not looking at every line of JavaScript that gets downloaded. So it's pretty scary.
The good news on the NPM side is that
NPM audit.
Well, Microsoft owns NPM now.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's well, Microsoft owns GitHub, and I believe GitHub bought NPM.
No.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So, but before the purchase, it was fairly recent. That was a couple months ago. They purchased NPM. NPM's always been a private company. It's like everything else in the whole Node ecosystem is open source or a foundation, some type of nonprofit or whatever. NPM was the only piece or part of that wasn't. It was established to be a commercial company, and there's been a lot of drama around NPM. It seems like that's always the one part of the whole Node ecosystem where there's a lot of drama. Has been NPM, either because something's not working or something's failing or somebody's using somebody else's namespace, or there's always some type of controversy or something coming out of like NPM. But one of the things they started doing, like I want to say about 2 years ago, is they started doing basically they have these robots that go through and look at the source code.
Yeah, security scanning. Yeah.
So they're doing security scanning, and they're taking known vulnerabilities and stuff like that. And what they will do is when they find a known vulnerability and it's in your code, like my GitHub repos now, I get pull requests. I'm getting pull requests now automatically
from the robot.
Stuff. Yeah. And so they made it so that it's I don't want to say it's you could be brain dead and do it, but it's you don't have to. They make it about as easy as possible to kind of like patch your code and stuff like that. But it's definitely good to go through and look at those security notices. And so yeah.
I know NPM audit, the new audit keyword or command on NPM will generate a security profile for all your dependencies and their dependencies, right? So if something was compromised or has a published that NPM audit. So if anybody that's out there, just run NPM audit, and first of all, see if you're running the latest NPM. And then secondly, see if it advises you and tells you, oh, this particular component requires this other component, and it's got a known vulnerability. You know what I mean? And I think it tells you, it says, run this command to pull in or add that specific, the patched version or something like that. And so if you put that in your, I want to say packages, but your project JSON, then it will get pulled down.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, cool. The real question is what happens next. We do have some Node apps, but I don't think they're looking at, or we're not a technology company, so we're not necessarily looking at squeezing every bit and we host everything ourselves. We're more traditional in that regard. It'd be interesting to hear from a technology company perspective, like, oh no, we're tired of paying for gigabytes every month. If I can pay 1 gigabyte less per month, then we've saved $14 or whatever the number would be or whatever, and that makes a big difference.
Well, I mean, I know people that work at startup. I mean, I think that's the key thing. It's like if you are doing stuff, where you are, you're using the cloud, and you're, either you're bootstrapping or you're a startup where you don't have a lot of money and stuff like that. It's like, those, once you start hosting or start getting a lot of traffic on on Amazon or, Azure and stuff like that, things can start to add up pretty quickly. I mean, I've had some stuff that I did on Azure. I started off in Azure as like, I had a MSDN subscription, and it's like, hey, it's, you can get this business thing where it's free for the first year and a half or whatever. I forget, you get like so many like Azure credits per, per month and stuff like that. And after a certain amount of time, that ran out. And then I started getting a bill from Microsoft. And I was like, boy, I spent up a lot of stuff on Microsoft. I'd forgotten about how much stuff I had on Azure. And then I got 1 month, I got like a $160 bill. And I was like, ooh, that's not what I meant to do. But it was interesting. I did a project a number of years ago where we had a back end for an Android app. And we hosted that on AWS using their Lambda services. And it was, it was a huge price difference by going with Lambda, or which would be your Azure functions, versus trying to spin up even a small VM and have that run constantly. And, and that's the cool thing about the cloud-based services. You only pay for what you use. Yeah. So if you can design your stuff so that you use very, very little,
right,
you get a much smaller bill, and that's a trick.
Yeah. Now I love Azure Functions. I've done a bit of work there, and yeah, I'm anxious to hear what is Azure's support for Fastify. Maybe they come up with you can build an Azure function using JavaScript. I know you can do that. Using Node, I know you can do that. The real question is, do they provide something, a Fastify template, or I have to actually know to craft that with my Node, Node-based Azure function?
Well, they have some documentation on that right here. So if we go to serverless, you can see here they have support for Google Cloud Run.
They don't have Azure
Universal.
There.
Yeah. I didn't see anything in here specific, but the signatures for Azure Functions and for AWS Lambda are a little bit different.
Right. Yep.
But I imagine it probably wouldn't be that difficult to is basically start leveraging Azure Functions using this. I read something somewhere recently where they're talking about like people hosting an entire Express app in AWS Lambda, and it was basically saying, don't do that. Don't do that. There's no reason to do that. It's like if you need to host a Express site, you probably want to set up at least a minimal server for that. But yeah, don't try hosting it on Lambda.
Huh.
All right. Well, that's all I had. Anybody else have any questions? All right. Hopefully we'll be able to do this in person in the future. And I'm going to try to get stuff lined up sooner here so we know ahead of time what we're going to be talking about.
I had a quick question, David.
Yeah.
Thank you, first of all, for the meeting. But it shows that it's recording. Were you going to be putting this any place, like in your GitHub or somewhere where I could refer to it?
Actually, yeah. So I actually have a YouTube channel that's set up for the user group. You can just do a search for JaxNode YouTube channel, okay. And I'll put a link out to it onto the meetup group. But also we have a Twitter account as well, and I'll put it out there as well, so that I'll make it the pinned tweet, so
okay.
we have it up there as well.
All righty, thank you.
No problem. All right, everybody, have a nice evening.
Hey, thanks, David. Appreciate it, man. I miss you.
Later.
Yep.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right.